All right, welcome everyone to a very special episode 150. And I have invited on one of my favorite past guests, but also one of my favorite persons, one of my favorite teachers, one of my favorite humans, one of my favorite beings of light. On today's episode, I interview a father, a yogi, a partner, a knowledge keeper, a student, an internationally renowned yoga teacher, a global ambassador for Lululemon, co-creator of the nonprofit Vinyasa Yoga for Youth, and the One Yoga founder. He's now based in Summerland, British Columbia, where he's currently leading many classes and offerings online as he continues to travel the world, teaching workshops and trainings, helping others understand and experience the oneness of yoga. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Ryan Leier.
Thank you, Derek. So honored to be here. Congratulations on 150, man. That's amazing. 4 years, 150.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be here, and thanks for the really sweet introduction. You're very kind, man, and I'm so thankful you're in my life as a, a friend and a student and a fellow practitioner. So good work. Thanks for doing this, sharing what you're sharing.
Right back at you, brother. So the goal of these conversations are really to uplift, inspire, and empower everyone tuning in to move forward with greater faith and belief in themselves on their hero's journey ahead, their hero's journey now. And so it's like pretty positive conversations. And this first question sets us up for such. And that is, Ryan Leier, what do you love about your personal world right now? And not about the external world, but let's look at your world. What do you love about your personal world, Ryan?
What I love about my personal world right now is I feel grateful and blessed and on purpose.
What do you feel grateful and blessed and on purpose about?
You know, I've been reflecting on the path in the past month often on what I'm doing in terms of my day-to-day, my lifestyle, my career, my relationships. And I feel so blessed to be able to practice and study and once in a while teach what I'm so passionate about. Like I was telling Dani, my partner, a couple days, well, I tell her often, but even in the past few days, I'm like, I can't think of anything I'd rather be doing than being on this yoga path. And, you know, so grateful for being a dad. I've got my daughter Kaya, who's now 21, and a stepdaughter Fern, who's almost 7. So I'm grateful for those things. I'm grateful that I still have my parents in my life and I'm living within a couple hours from them so I can get some time with them. And I'm grateful for the internet lately too, to be able to do things like this and to be able to study with my teachers and to be able to teach without having to leave the house, so I can still stay committed to my practice here at home.
That's incredible. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah,
A question I asked you last time when we first connected. So I looked back on the exact date we connected, and it was July 20th, 2020. And you appeared on episode 16 of Welcome to the Winner Circle. And a question I ask all guests at the start of these conversations pertains to their personal mission, so that the people that are not familiar with my guest, who I'm talking about, kind of get a little snapshot on who they are. They get a little snapshot of that in my bio that I read. But your bio was quite lengthy, as you heard. So through all the roles that you play and through all the hats that you wear, my question is, what is your current personal mission? When we spoke in July 2020, it was to honor your daughters, to take care of yourself so you could take care of others. Essentially, it was to give service to help make the planet a better place, to burn bright without burning out. That was 4 years ago. Maybe that's your current mission today. Maybe it's evolved, maybe it's changed. The floor is yours. What is your current mission here in this reality plane?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure it has evolved, and there's a lot of the heart of it is similar in terms of honoring my daughters and taking care of the ones who are here, and trying to better myself and make the planet better. And I'm realizing, and I said burn bright rather than burn out. And shortly after I talked to you, I had a serious burnout, man, where I got like very, very dark and depressed and suicidal, and like had no energy to keep moving for almost a couple of years. And thankfully, my daughter Kaya kept me going, just having her with me, and having my family, like my parents came from out in BC to came to Saskatchewan to like help me get through. And I wasn't sure I was going to get through. And um, it's interesting I said not to burn out, because I really did burn out, and I work daily to stay above the water in terms of my struggles with depression and and the dark side,
Hmm. Hmm.
Thank
Yeah,
thank
mental
God
health
for
is.
yoga and for family.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, mental health is something that I think is really important for us to talk about, and a lot of the things that you've dealt with have been impacting me recently and people that I love and care about in my life. So let's kind of just take a little look back at your journey with mental health, and then we'll kind of discuss your most recent path of darkness and how you made your way out of that. So from our past conversation, we talked about how anxiety began with you as a young child, and then in university, depression came about. It was during that time that things got really dark, and you started having suicidal thoughts. And you, once you revealed that to your sister on a telephone call, you realized how real that was, and you made steps to take a change. And you've been hearing about yoga, the transformative power of yoga, and that's when your yoga journey started. It started with a trip to the library, and you got BKSA Yangar's Light on Yoga and Baram Peace, Journey into Power, and you fully jumped in, and you never really looked back. And through these learnings, through this dive into yoga, you learned to better surf the waves, which is like the highs and lows of vritti of life, using meditation, prayers, and yoga. And that led to a mental stability for years and years. Unfortunately, you were hit by the death of your daughter, Thora Grace, and you held together for all the people in your life, your partner at that time, your family, Kaya. You held it together for 9 months, but then it just took a turn, and you met a real dark suicidal depression, and that was a tough time for you. You initially you went on medication, it helped stabilize you, and you kept up with your practice. You stayed with your yoga. You got on the mat, even if it meant just laying there and observing your breath. And this, along with your daughter Kara, helped you get through. And through that experience that you shared, taught you the importance of preventative medicine, and the preventative medicine for you, for when the next wave comes, which you said at the time, and that wave was coming. I'm curious to hear like why that preventative medicine didn't work or what happened there. But the preventative medicine was meditation, prayers, yoga, getting in nature and good company. So that's friends and family. So yeah, that's where we last left off in terms of your mental health journey. Um, and you could continue from there. Like what happened? You had all these tools, you had this preventive medicine, and then you burnt out.
Yeah, wow, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to reflect on what I've told you, and to I actually feel really heard and seen. So thank you for caring. Um, what happened from my perspective now? I gave up on my practice as I started to fall off and feel darker and darker. I gave up my yoga practice of meditation and asana, and I don't remember if I kept up the prayers or not. Like I know for years I pray every day, every morning, and I used to, but I don't know if I kept it at that time. But I know I gave up my pranayama meditation and asana. COVID kind of came, and I used to get my good company that we were just talking about by spending time with Kaya, family, and with friends. And I had these different communities where I really felt at home in, where I had studios or went to teach workshops. And so for many years, I could go and visit, like my best friend lives in New Orleans, so I could go and visit him or go and visit my homie in Whistler. Um, I only had a couple close friends in Saskatoon, and then I had like a good family connection in Vancouver and in Victoria. And when COVID hit, I kind of got isolated and I didn't have Kaya full time. And I think that the isolation caused me to give up on the good habits, and I started to get into some of my negative habits. Like at the time I was drinking alcohol, and I know I drank a lot during that time. I don't anymore. And for years I didn't, and I would kind of go up and down with it. But when COVID got intense, I started drinking a lot. And it's I haven't reflected on this very clearly, man. So yeah, not being in the good company I was used to having to plug into. Um, the bad habits, giving up on the good habits, going into the bad habits. And I felt hopeless during COVID. I just felt like the way it all was happening and the way the world was dealing with it and the George Floyd thing. And um, I lost a lot of faith in humanity and in the positivity almost, you know. I feel like that's kind of what led to me completely falling apart. Yeah, because I was dark, man. I was like in physical pain, couldn't really barely move. Like it hurt to walk around, and I didn't have the energy to eat or anything. Like thankfully my parents came and fed me, and then I stayed with them for probably a year and a half, and I probably didn't smile for a year, man. It was dark, and they just kept on like loving me to life every day, you know.
Hmm.
And then yeah, I think I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and then so they're loving you back to life, and then that spark was lit. How did that fire continue to burn?
Yeah, there's that Ram Dass Embers thing. Maybe if you get a chance, you could edit it in right now about it's a little beautiful speech or Dharma talk he gives. I just kept waking up and I started teaching yoga again and getting out into community a little bit. And thankfully, I met my partner, Dani, and she took me for coffee one day. And since that day, she's been by my side and she kind of like just dragged me through the darkness. She just told me daily, this is going to pass. This is temporary. This isn't you. This is a temporary thing. Just keep showing up. And she encouraged me to like get onto my mat and just lay there and breathe and do very simple postures. And she would drag me out into the nature and go into the forest or go down to the lake. So she was really instrumental. And then, of course, my parents and Kaya really stood by me.
Hmm. So, let's talk about Dani. Like, how did you guys meet, and what continues to make your relationship strong? Because now you guys are working together, you guys are hosting classes together, 40-day challenges together, amazing workshops. So yeah, let's just kind of talk about the origin of that love story and what keeps it strong.
Yeah, yeah, we met on Instagram. She was in Saskatoon for 6 years, where I lived for 42 years, 43 maybe. And we never met there. And she saw that I was doing a workshop or a class in Vernon, and she lived out in Summerland where we live now. And she came to the workshop and invited me to go for coffee, and we just became very close very fast. And um, from there, we started to get to know each other more, and we have so much in common in terms of our discipline, love of yoga, or discipline for and love of yoga, and our view of how to take care of our children and community in the world. I think we have a similar worldview in that. And there's also ways where we're totally different in terms of socializing, or like, yeah, we've got a nice mix of these differences that kind of come together like yin yang, and then we have our core that um, keeps us in alignment with each other in terms of the very important things like, like truth, kindness, fidelity, honesty, um, boundaries. Like, we have a lot that we have a really strong core that we always come back to.
Sounds like very strong communication.
We're working on it. Yeah, we're working on it. And it seems like whenever we have disagreements, it comes down to miscommunication. So yeah, we're definitely working through that, and that's what we're moving towards.
Beautiful. This relationship also brought into your life a stepdaughter, Fern, who is like really lights you up. You have her on camera with you when you teach your classes, and you've always been passionate about children and working with children. Hence, you starting your nonprofit Vinyasa Yoga for Youth, where you teach children from ages 5 to 22. Um, so yeah, like what is it like to have like another child back in your home? How has that taught you as a human and as a yogi? And we'll just continue from there.
Yeah, wow, she's such a great little teacher, man. She's so bright and sharp and funny and direct and honest. Yeah, it's been such a gift. I wasn't sure if I would ever have another child. Like, I had Kaya, and was the best thing ever raising her. And then I had Thora Grace, and she left her body so early. I really wanted that opportunity, and I missed it. And now I feel like I have another chance, having been a stepdad and having Fern half time. It's like I got this beautiful, amazing woman in Dani, and then I got this bonus of having Fern and having this little spark of light around me all the time. It's been such a gift, man. She
Mm-hmm.
is into yoga now, which is really cool. Does all the she wants to practice once in a while. She like calls me out to come and practice, which is so great. And yeah, what a gift, man. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, let's talk about yoga in relations to Fern and young children. What are you teaching her about yoga? How do you explain yoga to a child, uh, Fern, or but also the children you teach, the young children you teach online and in person with your Vinyasa Yoga for Youth? Like, how do you begin teaching yoga to a child when they know so much already? Maybe it's just a reminder.
Yeah. Yeah, good question. Uh, what I try to remind them is that they're capable of anything, and they're like these little like individual snowflakes that are incredible, and there'll never be another one just like them, and that they're like a magnificent um like child of creation. Like, they're reminding them of their divinity and their greatness, because I feel like that's what leaves so many of us. We lose that spark where we feel like we're worthy and we're confident, and lots of little kids have it, but the older they get, it starts to they start to lose it. So the ones who have lost it, I try to remind them, and the ones who still have it, I try to nurture it, and to give them a few of the tools to get like strong and to get focused, because I think yoga is so much about discipline and focus, as well as strength and flexibility and being tolerant and being accepting. So when I'm teaching Fern or a group of kids, I'm trying to teach them much beyond what the postures are. And when I am teaching the postures, I'm trying to teach them about focus and tolerance and moving skillfully and being themselves. And it's interesting, just as you asked this, I think about our teacher, Srivatsa Ramaswami, says yoga is immense absorption in truth. So I try to bring, I want them to remember the truth that they're just perfect as they are. You know, that they don't need to change or something, like his acceptance.
Beautiful. So these children, they are lovable when they're first brought into this world, and they know that, and they're so wise and they're so knowledgeable. But as they age and they get programmed by watching television, programming by watching movies, programming by being around their peers who are influenced by those same sources, influenced by their parents, influenced by news, the education system. There's a forgetting, a deep forgetting. So let's fast forward to teenagers. Like a lot of the people in the Vinyasa yoga for youth are like they're teenagers, early 20s. What is important to teach these older youth about what is yoga, and how do we remind them of that spark?
Yeah, that's the challenge, man. That's the challenge. I try to teach by example. I try to teach them that I'm still learning and I'm still evolving, and I've made many mistakes. And even if they've made a mistake, they can still affect their destiny. Because I believe that yoga is about like personal responsibility and personal power and helping shape and their lives, and that they can move in the direction that they want or feel. And so I just try to remind them of possibility and try to like spark some sort of, because there's so many kids have been where we've been where it's really dark and it feels hopeless, and like that life is never going to be a good experience, you know? So I try to give them as best I can a few tools that they can go deep. Hopefully they know that if they get deep inside themselves, they're okay and they're safe, and there's a peaceful place even within all the suffering, because the suffering comes, you know. And so hopefully I can give them a few tools to deal with the, like you had mentioned earlier, the waves and the storms that inevitably come.
What are those tools, Ryan?
Getting enough sleep, learning how to breathe properly, getting some healthy food, getting some nature, having a teacher, having some good community, positive coping mechanism, whether it's making art or shooting movies, art. What are some other coping mechanisms, man? Those are the first ones that come to mind. Moving the body, like, you know, exercise or yoga or tai chi, or, you know.
Good company is also important. How does one find good company?
Yeah. I don't know. They could call you up or go hang with you. Yeah, what's the tool? It's almost like discernment. It may sound quite hippie out there, but when I'm am with a group or with someone, I try to just feel like it's almost like there's an aftertaste or a feeling after you're with someone. Did they drain your energy, or did you feel better? And it's not like you're going to have someone uplifting all the time, but I feel like good company is authentic, and it's like authentic people or something. How do you find them? It's like, for me, it's like like, you know how they have the lie detector test? I wonder how they figured that out, but we each have like a truth receiver where we can feel. So I'm not sure, man. I think it's like trying to get sensitive and trying to pay attention to what we're ingesting with our friends, like what they're sharing with us or what the exchange is. I can't really find words for it.
Well, I think one thing is being that person yourself, being that person you want to attract in, and also patience and faith in that process,
Yeah,
not having
yeah, word up.
expectations. So as we progress in our age, we become more and more rigid, rigid in the bodies, rigid in our minds, rigid in our beliefs. Deep samskars kind of set in and get us stuck. And that leads us to adults. How would you explain yoga to someone, an adult, who knows nothing about yoga? And how would you encourage them to step in?
Yeah, I would try to explain it as best I could to them in their life situation. There are those things that I feel like you could tell everyone, like, yoga is communion or union with your highest self, or yoga is absolute peace and mental peace. And yoga is to be able to move your mind from a distracted state to a directed state, like focusing. Those things are kind of universal. And I feel like if I was explaining it to a basketball player, I'd be like, it's going to help you with your basketball. If it was a doctor or a nurse, I would be like, it could really help you as a doctor or a nurse, and try to package it as best I can so they could understand it. It's the misconception seems to be that yoga is just all of these postures, and I don't know how good of a job I do because I just show headstand all the time and these kind of challenging postures, but I would try to communicate that it's so far beyond those things, and those things really work if you do them, like the breathing and the postures and the sitting. And
Mm-hmm.
trying to communicate that it is, about being kind and being truthful and making the world a better place, and philosophical lifestyle things.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I just needed to make a correction though. Like you don't just show postures. You lead by example. And that's, I think, another importance of teaching people what is yoga. It's by leading yoga, by living the yoga. And one thing you mentioned in our past conversation is, as a yogi, always leave the place better than when you arrived, and that's something that you do with all your interactions and all your teachings, and whether that be on screen in person. So you're not just showing people postures.
Thank you, brother. That's very sweet. Thank you.
A blessing. COVID was like a difficult time for like so many, of course, um, you, me, the world. But some really positive things came out of it, and that was the availability to teach and be taught um, by masters online. We'll get into a few of those masters that you've introduced me to, Sri Shubha and Ramaswami shortly. But some great masters that I learned from were you, Peter Almas, Cecily Almas. I had the pleasure of taking a training, an online training with you guys, a 100-hour living yoga training. Um, what does living yoga mean to you, Ryan, and how do you do so?
Thanks again for the kind words, man. I definitely not a master. Thank you, though. Living yoga. I think of two things. I think like yoga is alive right now, and it's like through if we're teaching yoga and how we're living and how we're sharing it, it's like that's what's being passed forward. So I think of just those words, living yoga, like it's a living subject, and it's got ancient roots, but it's still so pertinent for today's world. And the other thing with living yoga is something I work on every day is to practice what I'm preaching. You know, Baron Baptiste on one of his teacher training, at the end we got these t-shirts and it was a St. Francis of Assisi prayer or line, and it said teach all the time, sometimes with words or something like that. I can't remember the exact. So I feel like living yoga is like everything we do, even on and off the mat, but um, trying to follow or following the ethical precepts or the yama and the niyama, the how we treat ourselves and how we treat others. So I feel like living yoga is to live out those things because the poses are great, and you could, I probably said this in the first podcast, but you could master all the postures and do like Circus Leier gymnast could do every posture, but it's not necessarily, yoga isn't necessarily coming through them. It may be, but probably not, you know?
Uh, hmm
And
Yeah,
then you have someone
I'm
who's
with you.
never done any postures in their whole life, and they just are like born yogis and they're living yoga without doing any of the exterior
Hmm
things, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, I don't want to always be correcting you, but I still stand that you're a master and you're a master of the thing that is most important, and that is mastery of oneself. And you are the best Ryan Lear that there's ever been, and that continues to progress. So that's my perception on that, on being masters. And I think the most important mastery is mastery of oneself, and you're on it.
Mm, thanks,
That
Derek.
brings us
Thank you, bro.
You're welcome. That brings us to the second part of that training that I look forward to taking part in one day, and that's giving yoga. What is giving yoga, and what does that look like for you in your life today?
Yeah, oh, sweet. Thank you for bringing this so I could share this. It was really interesting. So giving yoga to me is sharing it with the world, and hopefully not just to make a living and money, but to make the world a better place for betterment of humanity or of the planet, of even maybe the animals and the nature, all the things. And with there are exceptions, but most teaching we're doing is like teaching postures and teaching breathing exercises, which are so beneficial and so important. And it seems like we can weave in the philosophy and the spirituality within that. And right now, like in the yoga world, those two things are so important. And what I was so excited about is I remember an interview with one of Krishnamacharya, the yoga master who brought Sri Shubha's father, and Sri Ramaswami's teacher. And he was telling one of his students, this fantastic teacher, like Raghu's his first name. I don't remember. I can't remember how to say or spell his last name. It's very long. I think it starts with Ananta. I'm not sure. Anyway, he said that Krishnamacharya really stressed to him and to the students that if they're going to be teaching, that it's like an energy transfer. And he said to keep the potency or the concentration of yoga, he told them to teach or to practice 4 times if they're going to teach one, if they're going to teach an hour class, that they should practice 4 hours. And I found it really interesting. In my Iyengar tradition, I heard practice twice as much as you teach. And for a long time, I would say that, but I wouldn't be doing it. I would be teaching probably as much as I was practicing. And so now, thankfully, almost, well, since May 1st, I haven't missed a day of my asana and pranayama. And I feel like integral in teaching it now, where I feel like maybe I wasn't doing it justice when I wasn't practicing what I'm preaching. You know what I mean? So when I think of living yoga, definitely like living, like moving towards living the lifestyle, but also if you're going to be teaching poses, to do them. And with, I'm saying that, and I realize there's people who can't do any of the poses who can teach yoga really well, or who have injuries or disabilities who can still teach it. And I understand the yoga is to be experienced. It's not just intellectual. And I'm kind of going off, but it's also important to know the theory and the philosophy as well as the practice, the physical and energetic practice. It was kind of a lot.
Absolutely. Like, well, out of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, I believe there's like 196 aphorisms, verses, and only two of them pertain to asanas. And out of the 8 limbs of yoga, only one of those limbs is the physical practice. It's just a little small piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, three. There's actually three about the postures. And the third one is so interesting, and it's like the fruit, and you might have this in your too, the fruit of doing asana is you become more tolerant. So you're
Hmm
no longer messed with like by the praise or the blame, the success or failure. That would be nice. You may be able to, but I haven't got to that level yet.
Yeah, that's good that you mentioned that, because that's a follow-up question from last conversation that I wanted to kind of delve deeper into. And that was that you said something like, if your yoga practice is not making you more tolerant, you should change things up. And then you go on to say that you used to use your yoga practice used to actually make you more intolerant for many years, intolerant to differences. So could you kind of get into that and the lessons learned from that?
Yeah, Sutra 210 Te Pratiprasava Heya Sukshmaha. The moment you think you have it figured out, you get squashed like a bug. So yeah, I feel like if I'm not careful, I'm using yoga for cosmetic or for ego. Like my ego gets in the way so often. And yoga, as I understand it, is supposed to eliminate or sublimate, but to get rid of the ego, not make it stronger. And so if I'm not careful, I'm feeding my ego as a practitioner, as a teacher. So um yeah, I have to be very careful because I can get intolerant about many things and I can get egotistical so easily. So it's like a constant prayer for me to stay, like, not even stay, to be humble and to
Hmm
remember that I'm no better than anyone else. And then the other side that I go through is like thinking that I'm no good and I'm not as good as anyone else and I'm not as smart or as good looking or those things. So it's like half the time I'm like pushing down my ego, and then the other half I'm trying to like, the center of me is trying to be like, no, you're good just as you are, like you're worthy, such a
Uh-huh.
such a balancing act.
hmm Could you maybe shine some light upon one of these intolerances so that like myself and people listening just kind of get a better idea of like something that you're working with on releasing?
Yeah. Intolerant of like Dani not saying things the way I want her to say them or something. Like being intolerant of someone like correcting me, or I take it as a criticism, so I'm like very defensive. So like that defensiveness to me is an intolerance. I'm intolerant, like I feel like I'm intolerant to how people think of me. Like I want everybody to like me, so I don't know how that fits into intolerance. I can't quite wrap my head around it. But I would say definitely intolerant to like people correcting me, or and I'm not always teachable. Like I don't always take
Mm-hmm.
criticism or constructive feedback very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're also still working with your ego. You mentioned that 4 years ago, and I think it's something that we'll always work on. What have you learned about the ego, and what are you currently unlearning and letting go of?
You should be a therapist, man. What I'm learning about my ego is it's very crafty and subtle and sneaky. And I can sometimes be doing something and thinking that it's like to share something, but sometimes I catch myself being like, oh, I'm just trying to make myself look good or something. And what was the next question? Next.
What are you currently unlearning?
Hmm. I'm working on unlearning some of you mentioned the systems before and how we have these deep samskars, that these things that have been put upon us. And I feel like in a way, man, I'm unlearning some of like the education that we've been given in our education system about conformity and about being normal. And I'm trying to unlearn um, that rigidity about being normal and fitting in. I'm trying to embrace my
Mm-hmm.
weirdness, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So on the flip side of the unlearning, what are you currently learning?
Uh, I'm learning the power of consistency and discipline where I didn't quite understand or get a feeling of. And I'm learning that there's possibility in terms of being able to put the mind on one thing without being affected by other things. Like I could intellectualize it and I'm still like intellectualizing it, but I'm starting to have a feeling or something that it's real.
Mhm. Yeah, I was just gonna say it's like it's almost something with that doesn't even have words, and we talked about that last time. Is like you're leaning into a feeling, you're surrendering, you're sinking into that feeling, that knowing.
Yeah.
One
Yeah, I'm
thing that
starting to trust that knowing.
yeah,
Yeah, go.
yeah, no, absolutely. One thing that I'm currently learning, um, and it's like due and huge influence to you, is that it's taking the yoga beyond the postures. It's not being a poser. It's learning the yamas, the niyamas, the pranayama, and all the limbs of yoga. And in this process, also unlearning kind of um, the systems that have been put in place by capitalism, by greed, by profit. And this is where I'm kind of running into a wall, or well, maybe asking for some clarity, some insight, like um, from my readings of like yoga philosophy, but also Buddhism. It seems like to be a real yogi is to just give away everything and go like be homeless, go live under a tree, and just know that like just give yourself, and the universe will pay you back tenfold. And I believe that, and I feel pulled to that, but it goes against everything that I've been ingrained in me through through our culture, through my parents, through my education. But that seems like that's what the Buddha did. He left his palace and he just left everything, and that's what like a true yogi is too, right? Or like a traditional yogi is they wander about practicing living their yoga. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I go through that. I hit that thing too where I'm like, should I just move into the woods and practice and meditate and let go of that's it. To me, it's very advanced to be able to detach like that and to be able to renounce and to be able to just give it up. And yeah, I feel like that is a real path, and there are so many real yogis, to as I understand it, authentic yogis who have done that. And it's interesting that you talk about that. I've been spending a lot of time studying Krishnamacharya and his life and his family since we've been so blessed to be studying with Sri Shubha, his youngest daughter. And his
Uh,
oldest son, like, spent, I think he didn't get married, so he was studying with his father for years and years, something like 30 years. And his father taught him so much. And you see photos of his asana, they're incredible. He's a Sanskrit scholar, like translating, as far as I understand it, almost like lost text, like a brilliant man. And you know what he does? He moved out of society. He goes around with, I think, a few articles of clothing and one other thing. I can't remember if it's like a very, 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 very few possessions. And any extra money he has, he just gives to the children in the villages, like just living for not attached to material things and super giving and for the benefit of humanity and not getting material gain from it. But I understand like him as being a super yogi, and he's gone that path. And I feel like there are yogis in the world, but it's so easy for us to get seduced if we're in this material thing by, by the power or the money or the fame or the like those types of things. So
mhm.
I feel like it's possible to live a yogic way, but it's very, very difficult. And I still haven't quite reconciled how to be a pure yogi in this material world. And even like, I go through so often these questions: am I using too much paper? Should I have leather shoes? Should I eat meat? Should I have a long shower? Am I wasting water? Like, yeah.
What about this? Like, and it's something that like should I have a name, right? Like, I'm thinking like, should I even have a name? And
Hmm.
I don't think so. Like, I want to like shed my identity and just be um, like an exemplification of like the oneness of us all. That's not having a name. That's not having a title. That's just being just walking with like everything. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, man, that's so cool.
There's
Yeah, I've got
attachments
goosebumps.
that keep us gripped in, but I'm being pulled there.
So wild. I love it.
um, so one thing I wanted to get into is the one yoga mantra that I believe you created, and that is practice courage, grow roots, fly high. Truth is, we are one. So can we just get into that and discuss what those mean to you? And is it you that created this mantra?
Yeah, it was myself and Dustin Fruzen, a homie from Saskatoon, and we put it together as we were trying to like get one yoga out into the world.
Mm.
And the courage piece, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, let's just delve into them. So what does practice courage mean to you today?
Yeah, I'll tell you in one sec. I'll just give you one other thing that just came to me about the context. At the beginning, I wanted to have three things on the logo: a tree, a bird, and the lion. And for
Uh-huh.
the lion, it was courage, right? You know, the lion symbolic of courage to many of us. And the tree in terms of rooting in Mother Earth and environmentalism, and that's the growing roots. And then flying high, it was originally worded get high, and not necessarily high in that way, but also we were tolerant of people smoking ganja at, and I feel like for some people that's can help them on their path. I think it's very, very dangerous, but I'm not completely against it. You know what I mean? I think for some people it brings spiritual light, but it can be used just like anything both ways. And so that flying high, the bird. So I don't know if it was before or after, but you know, in university I got into nonviolent resistance and Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and Gandhi with his Satyagraha movement, the truth force, and like practicing nonviolence. He also was very clear about fearlessness and how that was so key on the path to liberation. So I always thought of the heart and courage as being such an important thing. And in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it talks about it in the 6 ways which yoga will come about. And I know Osho is a little bit out there and controversial. He did have some teachings that resonated with me. And he said something like, you can't be truthful if you're not courageous. You can't be loving if you're not courageous. You can't fully enter into reality if you're not courageous. Hence, courage comes first and everything follows. So courage was always, to me, the root of uh, what I wanted yoga, my brand or my way to be. And then growing roots, talking, I feel like yoga is activism too, and taking care of Mother Earth and these beautiful trees and the planet is such a major part of the path. Um, when I think about getting high, I think of like a wider perspective or seeing things from a elevated viewpoint or like the energy of enlightenment or um I don't know, bro, kind of like a higher vision or something. And I love the idea of birds flying and the freedom. Practice courage, grow roots, fly high. Truth is, that's one day I had a shirt that said Satnam on it, and I was at a workshop or something with Baron Baptiste, and he saw the shirt. He's like, "Yeah, truth is." And when he said it, I felt the capital in the is, and I feel like kind of like Gandhi said, how important truth was and how close to God it was for him. And I really believe in truth and in being true and satya. And so it's such a major part of where I'm moving towards, and definitely not even anywhere near perfect, but moving towards just being authentic and true, and that the truth will prevail, or the truth remains, or truth actually is. That one lights me up. And then we are one. I think a lot about the indigenous teachings that I've got about the animal brothers and sisters and the oneness of man and humanity and nature, and the oneness of yoga, huge, to join, to unite. So the oneness of ourselves with our like divinity or true self. So we are one, speaking to community as well. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier in the earlier interview, but as I was coming into the yoga world, there was such a big division between Ashtanga, especially, and Iyengar, because I was integrated into both those communities, and they were like so intolerant of each other. And then you had the Bikram people and the Kundalini people, power yoga people, and it was so segregated. And I thought like yoga could be more of a holistic group, like a group of yogis, not yogis who didn't like other yogis. I thought it was one place where we could be beyond competition, because like I've been in that competitive world so much, and yoga gave me a whole nother way of existing without having to be competitive. And it's still something I'm unlearning too, being competitive about the postures or who can do this pose or that,
Even being competitive with what you were able to do 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and just dropping those expectations, just being who you are now and just being okay with that and loving that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a challenge for me.
So, knowing that we're always growing, learning, and evolving, is there anything you would add to your one yoga, oneness mantra?
Mm. You asked me, the only word that popped into it's weird. It was like coming from right here. It was acceptance.
Mm, it's a powerful one. What's that word mean to you?
There's something receptive about it and like encompassing. And I feel so of course I'm into Sanskrit and the yoga traditional teachings and stuff. And there's this one niyama, santosha, and it's usually translated as acceptance or um, contentment. And it was one of the best couple weeks of my life is when Kaya came to teacher training online during the early online part of COVID and it was so great, man. I got to spend every day with her, like sharing yoga and learning from her and teaching her, mostly teaching. But there were times when I was able to learn from her. She's my greatest teacher. And one of the presentations where they had to share a yama or niyama, she shared santosha and acceptance. And um, yeah, I think of her when I think of that actually. And she's so tolerant and accepting, dude. Can I tell you one quick story that
Yeah.
really blew my mind? Talking to you as telling you about her being my teacher. So her mom and I split very early, and we had her half and half. And she was in kindergarten, and her care partner, the grade 2 or 3 or whatever, the care partners brought the little 5-year-olds up to introduce them to the school. And so they were supposed to say like their favorite food and who they love most in the world or what they love most in the world. And so her mom and I are sitting here watching. And so I think she said chicken McNuggies was her favorite food. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I'll have to ask her mom. And then when it came to the point of who do you love most in the world, I was like, oh my God, I wonder if she's going to pick her mom or me. It was like, and he said for her partner, I think he said, and Kaya, who she loves who she loves the most in the world is everyone. And so she said, like, she loves everyone the most. So when she got home, I was like, well, what about the bad people? And she just kind of looked at me like, bad people deserve love too. I'm just like, whoa, you're advanced.
That's incredible. And so, yeah, in our last conversation, we talked about various mentors, and Kia was one of them, and she taught you about acceptance and unconditional love. Some other people you mentioned were Thora. She taught you about grace, your parents, who are your first teachers, your gurus, your dad, about being a rock. He's been always there for you with unconditional support. Your mom taught you about sticking up for people, about activism. Iyengar, talked to you about yoga, discipline, harshness, the force of practice, dedication. You also were taught by Father Joe. He taught you about faith. Nikki Doan taught you about fire. Tina James taught you about respecting all forms of creation. And Ramaswami, he taught you that yoga is about being peaceful and tolerant. These COVID years had led us to online practice, and they led you to a lot of doing online practice with Ramaswami, who I've had the pleasure to sit on many practices and talks with. Um, Sri Shubha is another one. So let's spend these last few moments to just talk about the influence Ramaswamy and Sri Shubha have had on you, and why is it important that we learn from these teachers that are still here with us, and available with oncoming workshops in the upcoming weeks, months with you, but for the foreseeable future. As long as they're here, I see them being connected with you in one yoga. And why is it so important
Yeah.
for us to spend time with these true masters?
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like it's like sitting with the elders in the indigenous world. It's like these people have lived it and dedicated much of their lives to it for so many years. And so I feel like it's much more valuable to be a student of somebody who's been teaching for, like Sri Shubha's been teaching for 50 years, I believe, over 50 years. So she probably has some clues, and she's been practicing for most of her life. So she probably has some depth. And I feel like Ramaswamy practiced 33 years with the father of modern yoga, who's Sri Shubha's dad. Um, I believe that yoga, the it's important to have a lineage. And I know we're kind of like in post lineage yoga world, and it's great to be eventually your own teacher and your own master, like the Buddha would teach, like to tune into the inner guide in you is the highest. And until that comes, I feel like it's important to have these guides who have been on the path for longer than we have or than I have. So I feel so blessed that we have access to them and we don't have to go to India and wait outside to get taught by them for however long, but we can access them online and still catch that vibration of what I believe true yoga is, because I don't think it always comes across now with Instagram yoga and it just being about these poses. When I'm in the company of Sri Shubha and Ramaswamy, I feel like this type of being that yoga has polished and refined, where they're like so pure or inspiring or childlike, and definitely not perfect and not guru, like not perfected beings, but very high beings or refined beings who are practicing
Mm-hmm.
kind kindness and tolerance and joy. Like Ramaswamy's humor is incredible, Sri Shubha's humor incredible, and they just have this childlike energy and enthusiasm and
Mm-hmm.
clarity and yeah.
I see it as a frequency, and by witnessing, by sitting with that frequency, we learn how to step into that in ourselves. This is what I feel when I sit with them, but also when I sit with you. Frequency beyond those names, beyond Sri Shubha, beyond Ramaswamy, beyond Ryan Leier. It's a
Yeah.
frequency that is without words, that is in us all.
Mhm.
Two other mentors as we close here, two other mentors, one that you mentioned and one that I'm going to mention, um, speak about truth. Jesus, someone who you're very like inspired by. You have many books on Jesus, and he's inspired you on the path. And he talks about the truth will set you free. It's in John 8:32 where he says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Someone that I'm super inspired by as of late is this fellow right here, Ram Dass, and Ram Dass asked his guru Neem Karoli Baba about enlightenment. What can I do to get enlightened? And Maharaji replied, love everyone and tell the truth. My final question to you, Ryan, to close this conversation. What do you know to be true?
The first thing that comes is that love exists. Like there's this frequency. You're talking about frequencies of being held in like a being held in love. It's interesting you talk about Jesus and Neem Karoli Baba and Ram Dass. Can I quickly tell you a story
Yeah,
that I
of
read?
course. Of
I may
course.
have heard it at a Krishna Das concert or Dharma talk, but definitely in books I have read it. He asked Neem Karoli Baba how to get, or I think it was one of the people in the crew. Maybe it was Krishna Das, maybe it was one of his homies. I think it was a Canadian. I'll have to send you the exact story. So this is a chopped up version of the story, but he said like, how do we become enlightened and how do we get the yoga? And so they had just left the States and organized religion and all that. And Neem Karoli Baba said, be like Jesus. And Christian Das is like, oh, we just left so we could like get away from that. And so they go back and they're feeling it out and they come back and they say, um, how did it go? Then they say like, how did Jesus get it or something? And then he said, well, meditate. And so they're like, okay, they're going to meditate. And then I can't remember the exact way of the story, but then he says, meditate like Jesus. And then they're like, how does Jesus meditate? And then I guess Neem Karoli Baba got very still and a tear rolled down his cheek. And he said, Jesus lost himself in love, and that's why he never died. And so this idea of just being absorbed in love. Yeah, I know. I don't know what I know like to be true. I feel like there is a source that we can tap into so that guides and sustains or supports us.
Thank you for that. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for everything you've shared with me, past, present, and future. For people wanting to connect with you, they can connect with you on your website, ryanleier.com, where they could find all of the amazing trainings you're conducting online with yourself, with Dani, with Sri Shubha, with Ramaswami, and maybe there'll be some other guests to come. We'll see. Plus, you're traveling around Canada, the world, hosting different trainings and seminars, so they could find those dates on your website. They can also follow you on Instagram at Ryan Leier. Any last closing words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, also thank you. Well, I hope to see a lot of you out in the yoga world. The other truth is that I know is I don't know much. So I acknowledge that. I just want to acknowledge you, man, for being on this path and for doing the work. And every time I see you on my screen when I'm about to share, it really inspires me to be my best and to like tap into my best. I have so much love and respect for you, and I hold you in my heart, man.
Mm-mm. Mirroring that right back to you. So much love and respect to you, Ryan. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Anytime, man.
Mm. And that's a close on today's conversation. I look forward to future connection, my brother.
Yeah, me too.